Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to help open this fantastic celebratory event. And as Anna mentioned, I'm an alumna of what used to be Media Lab, and I've done my doctorate here 8 years ago. And the topic that I'm interested, I will speak about my current passions and what I'm currently interested in, because that's always the most exciting thing to talk about. And I work in between many different disciplines with design and art and computer scientists and information science and sociologists. So I hope to be able to speak about the meeting points between these disciplines, and hopefully it will be of interest to you. So I'm currently interested in this thing that I would like to call a digital subject. And this is about relations that are produced between humans and these loose aggregates that consist of data we live online and offline, and as we move around, we put things on social media, banks sell our data, GPS tracks where we are, we put our films online and our photographs online, and all of these things together constitute a certain kind of digital subject. And the way I became interested in this, I will just give you an example what brought me to here. I have a PhD student who works as a consultant in digital advertisement, and she was at the opening lecture of a new advertisement agency that came from the States into a UK market, but also it will be opening offices in many other European countries. I'm not sure about Finland. And this woman presenting the company was telling about the amazing ways in which they aggregate huge data sets. From consumer data, Telmar data, to bank data, to browsing data, to IP addresses, to looking at how people move around the city with their cards, and mapping it all together to create a certain, what they call digital zips, certain loose understanding of a neighborhood in relation to the income they have, what they can spend. And so then that is used to sell people personalized advertisements. And Chiara, my PhD student, she was sitting in this presentation quite horrified, but then at some point the woman was demonstrating the power of big data and how they can move from really large aggregations to really small individual profiles and back again. And they were focusing on one area of London and then zooming into a street and into a certain kind of sets of houses, and saying, oh, let's take, for example, this person. It's most likely a female, and she has most likely a child, and buys books, doesn't return books, and travels on the overground. And then Chiara said they were describing some profile of a person, and she was saying, at some moment I thought that it was me, like her supervisor. She said, that was you there. And that was amazing, because she's been to my house and she knows quite a lot about me after 5 years. And that really fascinated me. I was thinking, what is this thing that she recognized as me? What kind of relation does it have with me? How is it constructed? How is it built? What holds it together? So my question became, what is this digital subject? How is it built? How is it maintained? How is it? How does it maintain relationships with me? What does it do to me? And I started looking around into this around this concept, and of course, a lot of the discussions around this are framed in the vocabulary of demography and very traditional statistics. And some people talk about a digital demographic self. So this would be a person with all the data generated by the person, and would include traditional demographic categories such as gender, changes in bodily states, because getting ill or getting pregnant is a huge selling opportunity, and some interests and a certain kind of limited range of categories. And of course, the exactness of this self is not really required. So it's really different from the old, 19th century's anti-utopia, where you had totalitarian societies, and the horrible image was that, the Stasi or certain spy networks would have this complete coherent images of all people, the very holistic picture. And of course, in this system, you don't have to have any holistic images of the people, because it's about generating data, is about analyzing data very quickly, looking for patterns, and then acting on the basis of these patterns. So if you looked for a chair online, and then you moved on, and then you're watching the news, you're reading a newspaper website, you will have pictures of chairs appearing on the sites. So it's not really about what you are; it's about what you just looked at. And in this manner, you could say that these digital subjects are more like little flecks of identities, little traces, patterns that are left online, and then they become certain kind of minimal subjectivities. In a way, what's interesting about this is that these digital subjects are produced and distributed by software, and then they're pulled together by software. So you have a subject that's distributed and kind of leaking in all directions, and yet there's a big pull for one identity, for bringing everything together under one name, to being linked into this one unit. So there's quite an interesting interplay that is sustained by software systems, that is taking apart the subject but also bringing it together. And what's important about this, of course, is that these digital subjects, they don't represent the world. There isn't a kind of direct mirroring or mapping exercise, because these digital subjects are constructed. They're not natural, they don't just occur, they are products. So it is not a digital subject, is not a mere shadow of us. And this indexicality, trying to say that this digital subject is equal to that human subject, it is also always a political statement. It always comes from outside of this data, and is always a construction. It's a statement that does something. And if you think about it, I was quite, well, I'm still quite lost actually, and thinking what it can be. So you have the beginning point of this constant generation of data, that is me. And then there is an end point, those kinds of aggregations of digital subjects. But the relations between them are quite unclear. So it's as if we're writing a story about ourselves, and then this story is something that we become, but then it's not really writing. Of course, it's computational. We can't speak about this in terms of writing. But it is something that we produce, and then this is something that's produced, and then it produces something in return. But what it produces is not us. So there's always some kind of transformation happening in the middle of it. So I thought it's something like a Möbius strip. You always end up on the wrong side, So I'm producing my data, and yet when it's aggregated into digital subject, it's not me, it's the other side of the strip. And then when this digital subject enacts something in return, it's also not it doesn't come back directly to me, it doesn't come back straight to me. There's always some transformation happening in there. And of course, another level in this discussion is more artistic understanding of subjectivity. This includes, recently there's a lot of work of digital feminist artists who create online performances on Instagram or YouTube, and truly experiment with notions of subjectivity which are much more open and free to reinvention. And these kinds of understanding of subjectivity which are more rooted in traditional humanities approaches, you can also say they form another layer in these digital subjects. So what I thought, of how I sort of frame in the relation between the subject, the human, and this digital something, the digital subject, is, I thought a good term for it would be a distance. Because distance, instead of, if you use the word distance rather than relation, it introduces change. Distance itself as a notion has the kind of meaning of change within it. And this distance is thick and viscous, and sometimes it expands and sometimes it contracts and it twists, but it doesn't completely disaggregate. So to give you an example, sometimes it feels really far, and say if you look at artworks, you can say that there is a certain large distance involved in producing these digital subjects that are reinvented and, you know, somehow extended away from certain demographic notions of subjects. And yet, when you know, these cases when women get abused on Twitter, it's very intimate. There's no distance. It just collapses, and it feels like it's directly, the abuse is affecting you directly. You can't claim there is reinvention there. Oh, don't worry, it's like it's far away. It feels like there is no distance. So this is always something that is moving away and collapsing, and something that is full of itself, is intense in itself. And in a way, I think this notion of a distance, or this kind of relation that's established between the subject and the digital subject, is a point of, is a political question, it's an ethical question, it is a point of many disciplinary encounters, because for the humanities, the question of the subject is too difficult. People will say, oh, you can't really talk about the subject, it's huge. The computer science would say, well, we don't care about the human subject. It's just, you know, it's not a notion that we work with. And for the sciences, the human subject is a part of the real. It's like a part of the real world. For the humanities, it's something that is constantly rethought, reinvented. There's something very loose and dynamic. And in a way, I think staging these encounters between ways of looking at the relation between the subject and the digital subject becomes the new challenge for what we do now. Because on the one hand, you have lots of studies that say, oh, we don't need any subjects anymore. We don't need any traditional disciplines. We can study Twitter, and this would be exactly what people think. So you can say the distance here is collapsed. People just, this is a statement that says the digital subjects and the human subjects are equal. There's no distance. So we can study Twitter, and we can claim that that's what in people's minds. Or you can say that there is a distance, great distance, and people reinvent themselves, and technology is participating in what people become, and this would be a very different approach. And I think what I'm trying to do, and I think what's interesting that it's happening now, is that there is scope to do work and to resist dismissal of each other's approaches, because it's quite easy to criticize. For humanities person, it's easy to criticize computer scientists. For computer scientists, it's easy to criticize designers. And we, in a way, need to, I think, to slow and down and resist these easy dismissals and work together to think about these moments, the conceptualizations of this distance and these constructions that will become the ways in which our society is organized and works in the future. Thank you.